There are places on this earth that don't just test your body, they test your soul. Places where the sky feels closer than the ground, where the wind carries prayers older than memory, where every step forward asks you one quiet question: why did you come here? This is the Everest region of Nepal, and this is our answer. My name is the Nep Trekker. I am a trekking guide from Nepal, born in the shadow of these mountains, raised listening to their stories. To most people, the Himalayas are a destination. To me, they are home. And the man walking beside me? This is Tomas, a soul from Slovakia, now living in the Netherlands. A man who left the flatlands of Europe to come and breathe the thin, honest air of the Himalayas. We first walked together through the Annapurna circuit just 1 year ago. And somewhere between the high passes and the mountain wind, between shared meals and silent sunrises, we stopped being just a guide and a trekker. We became brothers. Because that is what the mountains do. They strip away everything that doesn't matter, the titles, the distances, the differences, and what remains is just two human beings walking together in complete wonder. What you are about to witness is 15 days in the heart of the Himalayas. 130 kilometers walked on foot, through ancient villages, glacial rivers, and rhododendron forests. We climbed to the sacred Gokyo Lakes at 4,790 meters. Water so still and blue, they looked painted by the sky itself. We stood on the summit of Gokyo at 5,357 meters and saw 4 of the world's highest peaks, standing before us like giants in silence. We crossed the mighty Cho La Pass at 5,420 meters, on ice, on snow, on nothing but determination. We touched the rocks of Everest Base Camp, the place where human ambition meets the divine. We climbed Cho La Pass at 5,560 meters, and we crossed Kongma La Pass at 5,535 meters. One final test the mountains gave us, and one we answered together. This journey is not just about altitude. It is not just about distance. It is about what happens to a person, to two people, when they choose to walk somewhere that is genuinely wild, genuinely humbling, genuinely alive. The Himalayas have a way of speaking, not in words, but in the way light falls on Dablam at golden hour, in the sound of a glacier groaning in the cold, in the smell of juniper smoke rising from a tea house at 4,000 meters. We listened. Every single day, we listened. Every great journey begins with a single ordinary moment. Not a helicopter, not a summit. It begins with a bus. The road from Kathmandu to Montali is a journey in itself. Green valleys dropping into river gorges, terraced fields climbing hillsides like giant staircases, villages perched on ridgelines as if placed there by hand. Thomas sat by the window, the way he always does, watching everything, missing nothing. That is the thing about a true nature lover. The journey to the mountain is already part of the mountain. We reached airport early, Bags ready, hearts ready. But the clouds had come. Heavy, low, unyielding. No visibility. No flight. The mountains had spoken. Not today. And neither of us was frustrated, because when you have walked in the Himalayas, you learn early. You don't have a schedule here. The mountains have a schedule. You simply follow. So we went back to the hotel and did the only reasonable thing. We jumped in the swimming pool. One last afternoon of warmth before 15 days of glaciers and high passes and frozen mountain air. Day 3. The sky is clear. The kind of clear that makes your chest expand. The small aircraft lifted off the runway, and within moments, Nepal opened beneath us, like something from a dream. Ridge after ridge, peak after peak, white and ancient, and utterly indifferent to how small everything else is by comparison. We landed at one of the most tricky airports, placed between the mountains, Lukla. Its streets are narrow and full of life. Mules loaded with supplies moving with quiet authority. Prayer flags snapping between rooftops. Mani stones carved with sacred mantras, placed by hands of devotion, worn smooth by decades of mountain wind. Thomas stopped at a prayer wheel and slowly, deliberately spun it, the way the locals do, with respect, not performance. I noticed. I always notice when a visitor treats this place the way it deserves to be treated. The trail opened before us. "18 kilometers to Nuptse, through villages like Phakding, Benkar, and Manjo, forests, glacial river valleys, over suspension bridges swaying above the Dude Koshi, the Milk River, wild and white and impossibly loud. You cross one bridge and feel alive. You cross 5 and feel humbled. By the 10th, you stop counting and simply walk, one step, one breath, one bridge at a time. At Manjo are permits for Sagarmatha National Park. Sagarmatha, forehead of the sky, Nepal's name for Everest. Then the Hillary Bridge, named after the first man to stand on Everest's summit. When your feet leave it on the far side, Everest is ahead. Everything familiar is behind. We walked it, prayer flags above, the river roaring below, and said nothing. Some crossings don't need commentary. The final climb to Nuptse was steep and honest, past mules and children selling local fruits, and yaks moving uphill as if they owned the Himalayas, because honestly, they do. When Nuptse finally appeared, tucked into its mountain amphitheater, warm lights and tea house windows, we dropped our bags. We looked at each other. No words needed. Day 3, done. Already, more than enough. There is a particular magic to Nuptse Bazaar in the early morning. The town sits like a crescent carved into the hillside, and as the light arrives, it touches the highest rooftops first, then slowly, slowly works its way down to the streets below. The smell of butter tea and fresh bread drifts from open tea house doors. This is not a place you pass through. This is a place you feel. Today was our acclimatization day. In the mountains, this day is not optional. It is essential. At 3,440 meters, your body is quietly working, adjusting, adapting, negotiating with the thinner air that now fills your lungs with every breath. The rule of the mountains is simple. Climb high, sleep low.
push a little higher during the day, come back down to sleep. Let the body find its rhythm before the harder days ahead. So we laced our boots lighter than usual, no heavy packs, no agenda, and we walked.
The trail up toward the Everest View Hotel climbs through forest and open hillside, the kind of hiking that feels like a conversation rather than an effort. We reached the viewpoint, and the clouds had come. A thick, soft curtain of fog draped across the entire Himalayan horizon, patient and complete, hiding everything behind it. No Everest, no Lhotse, no Dablam. Just white, just silence, just wind. The mountain would reveal itself when it was ready, and we had many days left. So we breathed the cool, foggy air. We listened to the wind moving through the valley below, and we were grateful. We made our way to the monastery in Nuptse Bazaar. Stepping through its gate is stepping into a different frequency of time. The walls are painted in deep reds and ochres, ancient Buddhist murals watching from every surface. The smell of juniper incense hangs in the air like a permanent prayer. Sometimes, the days that give you nothing on a screen give you everything inside. This was one of those days, and tomorrow the trail calls again. The backpacks go back on, the altitude goes up, but tonight, Nuptse holds us gently, 3,440 meters above the ordinary world.
We stepped out of Nuptse Bazaar into the kind of morning that makes a person feel chosen. The sky, clean and endless and impossibly blue. The air, cool and sharp and honest. The mountains, finally, fully, gloriously visible in every direction. Yesterday, the fog had its say. Today, the Himalayas decided to show up, and they showed up completely. And then, Dablam. There are mountains that impress you, and then there are mountains that stop you mid-step, that make your breath catch in a way that has nothing to do with altitude. Dablam is the second kind. At 6,812 meters, she rises from the valley in a shape so perfect, so dramatic, so impossibly elegant, that every photographer who has ever walked this trail has aimed their lens at her and quietly accepted that no photograph will ever be enough.
"11 kilometers ahead of us, and 600 meters of altitude waiting to be earned with every step. But the trail had its own way of making you forget all of that. The path unfolded like something out of a dream, so alive, so achingly beautiful, that the thin air in your lungs and the burn in your legs simply faded into the background. Your body was working hard. Oh, it was working hard. But your eyes were too busy to care. The mountains don't ask if you're tired. They just ask that you show up. Then came Mongla. At 3,975 meters, the village sat calm and unhurried against the sky, as if it had always been there and always would be. We passed through slowly, breathing it in, the stillness, the altitude, the thin, cold air that reminded you, gently but firmly, exactly where you were in the world. Beyond it, the trail dipped into something softer, a jungle, peaceful and green, wrapping us like a forgotten world.
Somewhere ahead, the sound of water, a waterfall, steady and indifferent to our presence, doing what it had been doing long before we arrived and would continue long after we left. 6 hours after we first set out, Doli village appeared.
One, two, three. Oh! One. 1, 2, 3. Oh, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3. 2. 1, 2, 3. Done. One more time. 1, 2, 3. Oh!
Another brighter morning. The trail above 4,000 meters has a different quality from everything below. The forests thin and fall away. What opens up is raw, more ancient, glacier moraine and blue sky, and rivers running cold and clear through valleys carved by ice over thousands of years. You stop feeling like you are walking through a landscape and start feeling like you are walking through geological time itself. And there, Cho Oyu, 8,188 meters, the 6th highest mountain in the world, turquoise goddess. She sits at the head of this valley, the way a queen sits at the head of a table, with total, unhurried authority. We walked toward her all day, and she filled more of the sky with every kilometer we covered. We passed through Machermo, a village laid flat in the belly of the valley, mountain walls rising steeply on both sides, like a secret, a small inhabited pocket of flatness in a world that is otherwise entirely vertical. Tomas was quiet in the way he gets when a place has genuinely moved him, the quiet of a person receiving something and not wanting to interrupt it by speaking.
Then the first lake appeared. Flat, still, glacier blue. Sitting in the valley like a mirror, placed there by the mountains so they could see their own reflection. Tomas stopped at the edge, stood quietly, the surface perfectly still. Mountain doubled in the water. The whole world turned upside down in a Himalayan lake. I said nothing, because there was nothing to say that the lake wasn't already saying, better, and in a language that needs no translation. Gokyo-ri rises 5,367 meters above the village below, from 4,790 meters at the lake to 5,357 meters at the summit. In distance, it is not far. In effort, at this altitude, in this cold, every step is a negotiation between the body and the mountain. The trail is steep and unrelenting. The air is thin enough that you develop a rhythm quickly. 3 steps, breathe. 3 steps, breathe. Stop. Look up. Keep going.
Tomas climbed steadily ahead of me. At certain points, I watched it and thought, this man came from the flat lands of the Netherlands, sea level, polders and canals, and long, flat horizons. And here he is, climbing a Himalayan peak, one step at a time, as if he was born for exactly this.
The final meters to the summit empty a person completely. Legs burning, lungs pulling hard at thin air. And then, the ground levels. The climbing stops. And the world opens. 5,357 meters. 4 of the world's 6 highest peaks standing before us simultaneously. Everest, 8,848 meters. Not hidden, not distant, but there, filling the northeastern sky like an undeniable fact. Lhotse, Makalu, Cho Oyu, and below, the Nozumpa Glacier, Nepal's largest, and the 5 sacred Gokyo Lakes, laid out like jewels in the valley floor. At the summit, we built a small cairn, stone by stone, carefully placed. I was here. I climbed this. I stood in this impossible place and left something behind, not to claim the mountain, but to thank it. Coming down, the lakes grew larger below us. The village reappeared. 5,357 meters. 4 of the world's highest peaks seen simultaneously. 1 small cairn on a Himalayan summit. And peaceful, calm, and proud evening at Gokyo Valley. Day 7. Done. And we were only halfway through.
There are days that feel gentle, and then there are days that ask something deeper of you. Today was the second kind. We left Gokyo behind in silence. The still blue lake, the quiet morning light, the comfort of a place that had held us well. Ahead lay movement, effort, uncertainty. The trail led us onto the Nozumpa Glacier, a world of ice and stone, broken and uneven, where no step feels permanent. Loose rock underfoot, the ground shifting just enough to remind you this is not a place to wander carelessly. Balance becomes everything. Focus becomes survival. Step by step, we crossed it. Then the climb began. Slow at first, just a gentle rise. But mountains do not reveal their true nature immediately. The trail tilted upward and kept tilting until walking turned into effort, and effort into intention. Snow appeared quietly, soft patches at first, then spreading wider until the world turned white and reflective. Each step sank slightly, each breath grew heavier, and then came the walls. Not walls in name, but in feeling.
Steep, relentless sections where your body leaned forward and your hands reached instinctively for support. You weren't just walking anymore, you were climbing. The pass never shows itself easily. It hides just beyond the next rise, then the next, then one more after that. But this is the agreement you make with the mountains. You keep going, and eventually, they let you arrive. Cho La Pass, 5,420 meters. The wind met us first, sharp, immediate, as if it had been waiting. Cold air cutting through every layer, reminding you how high you've come. Prayer flags stretched across the sky, snapping, dancing, alive, marking this crossing point between valleys, between journeys, between who you were this morning and who you are now. We didn't celebrate loudly. We just stood there, breathing, taking it in, because sometimes that is enough. Then came the descent. Steep, loose, demanding. The kind that tests your patience more than your strength. Every step downward, requiring just as much care as every step up. Slowly, very slowly, the slope softened, the trail widened, the valley opened. And there it was, Dzongla, quiet, still, bathed in the soft gold of evening light. The kind of beauty you don't speak about immediately, you just sit with it. After a day that asked everything of you, Dzongla gave something back, peace, space, and a sky that felt impossibly close. The trail from Dzongla to Lhotse moves through landscape that exists nowhere else on Earth. You are above 4,800 meters now, high enough that the world below feels like something from another life entirely. The vegetation has disappeared completely. No trees, no grass to speak of, just rock and moraine and sky. The bare bones of the earth exposed and honest in the way that only the highest places allow themselves to be. The trail is wide and open, rolling through glacial terrain with the unhurried confidence of a path that has been walked by thousands of feet over decades. Pilgrims and climbers, porters and guides, dreamers and seekers, all moving in the same direction, drawn by the same mountain, answering the same quiet call. We watched Dablam from this valley, and if you have ever wondered what it would look like to watch a mountain breathe, this is the closest answer the physical world can give you. In time-lapse, the clouds moved around her like living things, wrapping her summit, releasing it. And ahead of us, growing larger with every kilometer we walked, Pumori, 7,161 meters. Its name means unmarried daughter in Sherpa. Pyramidal and perfectly formed, white against the deep blue sky, Pumori stands at the head of the Khumbu Valley like a guardian. In the Lhotse tea house that night, the particular atmosphere of people on the eve of something they have worked toward for a very long time. Tomorrow was Everest Base Camp. The words themselves carried more weight than any conversation could. Another beautiful and awaited day, heading to Everest Base Camp. The trail from Lhotse moves through glacial moraine, that ancient, humbling landscape of rock and ice debris deposited by glaciers over thousands of years. There were no soft edges here, no gentle paths, no comfortable ground, just rock, gray and brown, and occasionally gleaming white, stretching in every direction under an enormous sky. Pumori walked with us on our left, so close now that you had to tilt your head back to find its summit. And then the trail turned, and there it was, Everest. No mountain prepares you for Everest, because Everest is not just tall, it is the convergence of everything: geology and history, human ambition and natural humility, all concentrated into one peak that rises above everything else on this planet and simply is. I looked at Tomas the moment it appeared. He had stopped walking completely, standing in the middle of the trail, other trekkers moving around him, with the expression of a man looking at something he cannot fully believe is real, something he has seen in photographs his entire life and is now understanding for the first time is not a photograph. It is a mountain. It is right there, and it is beyond everything a photograph ever suggested. Everest Base Camp, 5,364 meters. There is no dramatic summit moment here, no single breathtaking frame. Base Camp is rocks and ice and prayer flags and wind and the knowledge, the absolute physical knowledge that you are standing at the foot of the highest mountain on the surface of this earth, where Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay prepared for the first summit in 1953, where every Everest expedition has begun, where dreams have been fulfilled, and sometimes where dreams have ended. This place carries all of that. Thomas and I stood together at base camp without speaking for a long time, because there are places that render language temporarily unnecessary, and this is one of them. We had walked 10 days to stand here, and it was worth it. Every step, every cold morning, every kilometer we had walked, every single one, worth it. The coldest morning of the journey, we dressed in everything we had, layer upon layer, until we were barely recognizable as the same two men who had started in Kathmandu. The cold hit us like a wall. We started climbing. 3 steps, breathe. 3 steps, breathe. No warm-up, no gentle beginning. The mountain simply rises, and you rise with it. Or you don't. As we climbed, the weather made its own plans. Clouds rolling fast across the valley, wind building, cold and cutting and serious. Above us, where Everest should have been standing in pre-dawn enormity, only cloud. We kept climbing. Kalapatar, 5,560 meters, the highest point of our entire journey. Wind tearing at every layer, cold pressing in from every direction. Everest, just there, just behind that curtain of cloud, completely hidden.
I want to tell you something honest about this moment. It would have been easy to feel cheated, but standing there with Tomas beside me, having climbed through darkness and wind to be here, I felt none of that. What I felt was pure, uncomplicated respect for the mountain's absolute right to show itself, or not, on its own terms, in its own time, by its own choosing. Everest does not exist for our photographs. The last high pass, the mountains saved for the end. Walking the Khumbu Glacier in the early morning, this glacier is ancient. Its ice formed from snowfall that fell centuries ago. Walking on its edge at 5,000 meters makes you feel geological, like you are not passing through a landscape, but through time itself. The ascent to Kongma La begins without apology, steep from the start, the same rhythm that has carried us over every high point of this journey. Gokyo Cho La Kongma. One final time. 3 steps, breathe. Kongma La, 5,535 meters, and beside it, lakes. Glacial lakes sitting impossibly at the edge of the pass. High-altitude water the color of cold jade, perfectly still despite the wind, moving across everything else. Prayer flags between cairns marking this threshold, a crossing between 2 valleys, 2 worlds. We sat at the lake edge and rested, and watched the mountains perform. Clouds rolling over ridgelines and dissolving, light shifting across rock faces, the lake surface catching every change, a living mirror at the edge of a high Himalayan pass.
The descent led us across snow. Deep, clean, satisfying snow. And I watched Tomas walk through it with something close to joy in every step. There's something about clean snow on a clear day in the Himalayas that makes a person feel alive in an uncomplicated way. Like a child, before the world taught us to rush through things that deserve to be savored. Chukum, 4,730 meters. We dropped our packs outside the tea house. 2 high passes and the Everest region complete. The mountains had given us everything: wind and cloud and sun and snow. And we had given them everything they asked: our effort, our attention, our respect, and most importantly, our presence. Full, complete, unhurried. After 12 days of climbing, the trail finally, gently, beautifully turned down. There is a quiet joy in descent. Air thickening, warmth returning, color seeping back into the world as gray fades into green. We were walking home, and the mountains watched us go. Through Dingboche, Pangboche, stone walls, chortens, yaks, unchanged, steady, Himalayan. At Tangboche, the monastery held its silence. Juniper, butter lamps, low chanting. Dablam rising behind, Everest beyond. A place that doesn't ask to be seen, only respected. Then, Tomas stopped me. In the forest, the danfe, Nepal's national bird. Impossible colors shifting in the light. Blue, copper, purple. Too vivid to believe, yet simply there. We stood still. 2 men, 13 days in the high Himalaya. The trail ended beneath our feet, step by step. From Namche, I looked back. Dablam, Everest, unchanged. The mountains stay, we don't. Same trail to Lukla, but we were different now. One last bridge, one quiet ending to something that gave us more than we came for. In Lukla, we remembered the passes, the bird, the moments, laughed, fell silent. The flight rose, the Himalayas, one final perfect farewell, then sky. Because the mountains don't leave you, they stay. 15 days, 130 kilometers, 2 brothers, 1 Himalaya. Until the next trail.